Hello, Garland Nixon here with the professional cynic, the one and only Mark Sleboda. We got lots of things to talk about. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here with the one and only Mark Sleboda. Mark, tell everybody where they can find all of your good works online.
Garland, thanks for having me. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be on the show. You can follow me at Elon Musk's Twitter X at Mark Sleboda1. You can also find me at The Real Politic with Mark Sleboda on both Substack and Telegram.
Thank you. And make sure you follow me on Rockfin and particularly also on Rumble. As we know, I did a video last night, and for some reason, YouTube decided it violated community guidelines. They won't tell me why, but at least last time that happened to Mark, they snatched his whole channel and he sometimes got it back. So they can be a bit arbitrary and capricious at times. So make sure you follow me over there on Rumble. And the video from last night, or all of my videos are on Rumble. So if there's ever a video that for one reason or another you find is not on YouTube or somewhere else,
Political censors.
Yeah, right. Rumble's a good place to get it. All right. Guess I'm really pissing off the Europeans right now, but let's start here. Talk about pissed off Europeans. You know, Vance goes over and, slaps them upside the head. Hey, you're overturning elections. You're doing all kinds of evil anti-democracy deeds. Your democracy problem ain't Russia and China. Your democracy problem is in Brussels, right? And what happens? They're like pissed. They cry, literally. They cry, they weep, they moan. And now they go out and literally arrest the leading candidate. I guess it's their way of saying, screw you and your own little democracy speech, Trump people. We'll fix you. We're going to arrest the guy who's about to win an election. I mean, well, if you think about it, that's very, what's the word I'm going to look for? Zelensky-esque of them to arrest literally arrest. I mean, that's what Zelensky does. So why not? Except Zelensky beats the guy a bit, seizes all of his finances, and then, tries to trade him off to Russia for some Nazis. Maybe that's their plan.
Yeah, I mean, it's the Orwellian definition of democracy. Democracy is arresting the top political candidate, right? I mean, yeah, so I mean, this saga goes on. I mean, first Gorgescu, right, whom is derided in the Western media as a far-right figure, but ultimately, what they hate about him most is he is a Kiev regime skeptic, right? He's not pro-Russian like Orban. He's pro-Romanian, but he doesn't like the Kiev regime, and he certainly doesn't think that Romania should be financially or militarily or otherwise supporting it. And that's his real sin, right? I mean, that's the blasphemy that cannot be accepted, particularly from a country like Romania that is absolutely essential to the Western proxy war on Russia in Ukraine because of the very large border, right, that it shares, right? And it's absolutely necessary to get everything from the south. A considerable portion of U.S. military aid arrives in Greece and other NATO ports to the south there, and then is sent up the Black Sea coast through Romania. Plus, Romania is right there on the Danube, right across from Odessa. It's very important to the war effort. So, I mean, the only thing that could be more important is Poland itself. So Romania is not allowed to, pull out of this proxy war, at least as far as the Europeans are concerned. The Trump administration seems to have a different opinion, or at least some people within the Trump administration have a different opinion. So Gorgescu won a plurality of the vote in the first round, right, of the elections already last year in Romania. And after that, the Supreme Court suddenly declared the election null and void. The whole results of the first round were thrown out because of what they claimed was a Russian-financed TikTok influence campaign. Because, you know, a TikTok campaign was what, you know, almost certainly swayed the majority of Romanian voters to vote for what they call a far-right figure. It turns out, though, that Russia had nothing to do with it, that it was actually one of the mainstream Romanian parties, the center right, that was basically setting this whole thing up. They paid for the TikTok operation and then evidently fed the information that it was Russia. But the investigations from the media there were pretty clear. And so the whole pretext is complete nonsense, right? It was a fallback. And now that they finally agreed to redo the elections, and Georgescu was that day going to go and register as a candidate, and all the polls in Romania show that he would win and win handily, right? Because there have been very large protests over this whole affair in Romania, and he was arrested. And now he's being charged with misfiling campaign finances,
promoting anti-Semitism. I think that's another one.
I didn't see that one. I did see
Reuters is saying
national security, and I saw organizing a fascist organization. Now, you don't have to agree with Georgescu on everything. I'm pretty sure I don't. I'm not really concerned with the domestic issues in Romania, but I'm pretty sure that he's not a fascist, because I know what the real fascists are. The fascists, the Banderite fascists, are the ones that the West is supporting in Ukraine, the literal fascists. In fact, there is going to be an anti-Russian march in Berlin this weekend. And one of the big participants of it is the Russia Volunteer Corps and the Free Russian Legion, right? And their leader is a literal neo-Nazi who goes by the Denis Nikitin, also known as Kapustin, who goes by the name White Rex, which is the name of his neo-Nazi clothing label, right? This guy has actually been banned for travel in Europe before. I guess it's gone away, right? But and they are funded by the Kiev regime. They fight for the Kiev regime. These are Russian neo-Nazis. Yes, there are neo-Nazis in Russia, and they fight for the Kiev regime, right? They're going to be headlining this march in Berlin, this anti-Russian march in, the city where Russia overthrew Hitler's regime or the Soviet Union overthrew Hitler's regime in 1945. So this is all so obscene, so Orwellian, so ridiculous. So to charge him with creating a fascist organization is just like, no, you're the fascist. And going out of their way to prevent him from running actually proves who the real fascists are anyway. That is Trump called it authoritarian, but I think it actually, or Vance did, I should say, not Trump personally, but I think it goes a bit beyond that. So, anytime anyone talks about Europe and democracy and political freedoms and everything, just laugh at them. Just laugh at them. Their narrative of themselves at this point is it doesn't even warrant debunking. It is so risible at this point. They are far more, controlling, and the censorship and the deciding what is an acceptable political opinion and what's not. If I was in Germany and I walked around with one of these St. George ribbons on my lapel, or wore my Z that I often wear on my chest, I would be arrested.
Or
right?
even a watermelon pin, you know, because the Palestinian colors, the watermelon thing. If you wear a watermelon pin, or St. George ribbon, or watermelon pin, or the letter Z that stands for Zorro, a great movie. Zorro, he makes the sign of a Z.
Democracy. We're fighting for freedom and democracy, right? I mean, get over yourselves. Get over yourselves. This is geopolitics, and you're on the losing end of this particular stick. So, yeah, I am surprised that they are being this blatant after the U.S. called them out at the way J.D. Vance did at the Munich Security Conference. I predict that this is not the last thing that the Trump administration will have to say over this affair.
Do you feel like this, Mark? Do you feel like this is, as soon as I saw that, particularly in light of the fact that this was an area that J.D. Vance specifically mentioned, Romania.
Yes,
he specifically mentioned that, right?
Romania,
so I'm talking about your Romania, you're talking about your Romania, and they do this. It's not just okay, we're going to do this because we don't want to guide them. It's a big middle finger. You know what I mean? It's a big FU to J.D. Vance and the Trumpy people and all of the people that are saying, hey, you guys, look, you know, come on, you're talking about democracy. What the hell are you doing here? It's a big, like an FU. Even this this thing they're going to have in Berlin with a bunch of Nazis goose stepping all over creation again. And this, it's like, now they're like, we'll fix Trump. We'll show him that we're going to fight back, and watch this, Trump. If you think you're going to tell us what to do with democracy, we'll show you democracy. Boom, we're going to grab your boy and we're going to arrest him. Not that he's anybody's boy, but you know what I mean?
I heard reports this week that the Trump administration has also, along with U.S. aid, put a hold on everything that the National Endowment for Democracy, the other big regime change, color revolution, U.S. influence in other countries, institution. And I'm like, well, now they could actually use it. I mean, you could actually use the National Endowment for Democracy legitimacy against the powers in Romania that are preventing actual democracy from occurring right now. That which is a shame. It would be ironic. See, at some level, we know that the EU technocrats, right, the ones that rule the roost in Brussels and through many of the member states in their governments, are this type of postmodern liberal, right? That is, again, Orwellian in that they claim absolute freedom, and then they block anything that anyone else, they ban and block and everything that anyone else finds offensive, which is just like, it's absurd. They in so doing, they become more authoritarian. They're kind of like authoritarian liberals. I mean, is that a thing?
I put it like this. Traditionally, when people talk about ultra nationalist, right? Ultra nationalist, what they really mean is, fascism, right? I call them ultra liberals, because if you take, to me, your ideology, whatever it is, and you take it to this ultra extreme level, right? It becomes outrageous. It becomes a caricature of whatever, ultra nationalist becomes a caricature of nationalism. And ultra liberalism right now, this is like the evil, like the bizarro world with a Superman bizarro world. You know what I mean? It becomes this evil. Like, how many times have you seen even the Star Trek Captain Kirk, where there'll be a show or a movie and a guy will come out from another dimension who's like the opposite Garland or whatever, and that person's evil? And that's what ultra becomes. So this ultra liberalism is a totalitarian fascist liberalism that says we're doing it for good stuff, to save the minorities and the gay people and all of the people that need women, blah, blah, blah. What do you got to do? We got to pretty much align with Nazis, kill a lot of innocent people, start wars, and of course censor everybody, because how else could you help the minorities, Mark? What's wrong with you? You don't want to help the minorities.
Yeah. I'm all for the Russian minority in countries like Latvia and Lithuania, and Estonia and Ukraine, right? Anyway, but those minorities don't deserve any rights. No cultural rights, no language rights, no political rights, no religious rights, no press rights, no rights at all. It's interesting. I think Gorgescu falls into the category of the populist right, that Orban is accused of being in, that some other figures in Europe, or maybe you could even just say populists, because Robert Fico is a populist left, hard left, right? Like old communist left, right? And really, I think what it is that the Brussels and most of the countries in Europe have long since established a form of managed democracy, where there's an accepted center-right, center-left shuffle, right? And every once in a while, you get so sick of the corruption and the inaction and that nothing happens. You vote out the guys, and the only other guys you can vote for, right, because of the way the political calculus comes down, is the other center-right party, the center-right, center-left, this triangulation of politics. And that keeps everything nice and managed. But lately, in a whole host of European countries, you have figures on the right and left, right, always referred to as far, emerge, that are not part of that triangulated hegemonic center. And, the Le Pen people in the National Rally Party in France, the AfD in Germany, Robert Fico's leftists in Slovakia, Viktor Orban, the Law and Justice Party, of course, in Hungary, and now we've got Gorgescu in Romania, and among other things, right? The continuation and the slow attempt to create a centralization of power in Brussels is not to be opposed, right? To create a united subjects of Europe, or I don't want to call it states of Europe, united subjects of Europe, right? This attempt to turn the EU into an to a nation destructing machine, except in the East, where the nationalists are useful as a bulwark against the Russians. Their nationalism is promoted, right, in the Baltics and Poland and those countries there. But obviously, the nationalists in Romania and Hungary have gone astray, because they don't want any part of this anti-Russian foreign policy mission. And ultimately, that is the one thing that is for this triangulation of power and politics. You can't have a diversion from the foreign policy orthodoxy in Brussels and the member states, in support of US-led Western hegemony. And what's ironic is that in the United States, that has long been the same situation until Trump, emerging from the populist right. So the Europeans clearly identify it as a very real threat. And now the hegemon itself, because the Republican Party over the last decade has not been able to stop Trump's rise to power through their own ranks. He basically co-opted one of the center parties, the center right, the Republicans, and he is changing it, right? There's always a question of, is it changing him or is he changing it? And during the Trump's first administration, I think you wouldn't be far off the mark to say that it was changing him, that it had taken control of him. I mean, his own officials like John Bolton bragged about manipulating him into doing, what the neocons wanted anyway. But Trump is obviously making an attempt, right, both domestically and in foreign policy to break away with that in his second administration. So he's breaking that foreign policy orthodoxy, and it's effectively the hegemon itself defecting from the role of hegemon, because Trump sees the role of hegemon, as far as I can tell, to be um, too costly in terms of money, political power, economics, everything, and not getting enough return. So it's not like the US wants to stop being a superpower or a fading superpower or a great power, or it's just doesn't want to fund the rest of hegemony, right? Economically or militarily. It sees that it's gotten a raw deal that way. And part of that is a bit of leaning up, because it's got to slough off some of the responsibility onto Europe and other countries if it wants to get serious about pivoting to China to confront what they see as their greatest opponent and so forth. And the US has been trying to pivot to China since Obama, but events keep happening, right? I mean, Russia keeps being inconvenient, and the Middle East and everything else. And they've been unable to do that. And so Trump is trying to pivot from China, and he seems to be trying to drop the whole responsibilities of hegemony along with it. That's why the constant refrain, Europe has to pay their own way, right? If they want to give Ukraine security guarantees, that has to be them. They have to spend more on defense, right? We would like eventually to pull our troops out of Europe, right? They're not saying it's going to be anytime soon, but they said they would like to. Why? So that they can send them to China, right? Or at least, to the Pacific on the borders with China. If they put them in Taiwan, it is China. That is, what's going on here. And Gorgescu is in Europe. Obviously, they're not coming to grips. They intend to, at times, attempt to manipulate, at times attempt to ignore, and at times confront Trump and hope that in 4 years he goes away and the U.S. is back to form again as the hegemon like it was under Biden. And they hope to last Trump out. We'll see how well that goes, because if Trump does manage to, to some degree effectively win his civil war, political war at home against the deep state, well, then he'll be able to concentrate on Europe. And I think that Trump really does see a degree of political similitude between his populist right and populist right figures like Orban and Gorgescu in Romania. You're all familiar with the Liberal International, right? Well, maybe this is a populist right international, right? Why not? If they have, they're never going to agree on everything, but if they have a degree of political and geopolitical agreement on a lot of things, the way that, let's say, Orban and Trump seem to do, well, then, why not? Why wouldn't they? Just because you have nationalist views, right? Even if it's, shall we say, populist nationalists, doesn't mean that you are, opposed to nationalism in every other country.
Well, and let me add this. There were, and God knows they have their flaws, but at one point, there were some semi-left populist people that were running a Jeffrey Corbyn and a Bernie Sanders. Now, granted, since then, there's been lots of things that we could complain about them. But my point is, with them, notwithstanding who those guys are and what they've done since, there was a left-wing populist sentiment starting to arise at the same time that Trump, the right-wing populist sentiment started to arise, and the so-called left-wing populist sentiment wiped theirs out. They crushed it. They took Corbyn out.
The Democrats in the US
and the Labor, they took them out. They ran them out of their own parties. Those guys could have been flawed, but there was a populist sentiment, and I'm sure other people would have risen, and that populist sentiment was arising, and they smothered it in the crib.
Yeah.
And so people were left with nothing, but there were people that were like, well, I'm afraid we're going to get nuked. I think I'll vote for Trump. They didn't agree with him on a lot of economic things, but they looked at foreign policy. You left them with no other healthy option to have a left-wing populism, because that's what we'd have ended up with, a right-wing populism, and they could have battled it out and people could have chosen it. It could have been healthy. That wasn't happening. They created an environment on themselves where the Trumps and these types of people were the only option. And when people looked at these monsters, they looked at Ursula von der Leyen and Macron and his filthy ilk, and they looked at Trump and they're like, Trump's starting to look real good. When I look at, Baerbock, these people are incompetent. These people are corrupt. These people are Nazis. They're supporting Nazis. They're downright Nazis. And these people don't give a crap about the people of their country. They want a supranational alliance that gets rid of all democracy. And if you look at the history, they created this monster. They created this dynamic. And now, as I said, I think this is an open punch at Trump. That's your boy and you like him. This is a way we can take a shot. We don't have a lot of ways to take a shot at you, Trump, but that's a way we can take a shot at you. And I think the Trump people know it.
Yeah, I think that's probably part of the calculus, right? I was trying to think of what is the opposite of populist? I guess elite, right? We want to call these institutional elite parties, right? I still think that the keeping Romania on board with regards to the centralization of power in the EU, and of course keeping them on board with Project Ukraine is more important.
And that block, stopping that block. There's an anti-NATO bloc. A kind of, I'm not even going to call it nationalist, but how about this? A block of people who say we're like concerned about the cost of food and electricity in our own country, and we're not going to get involved in foreign policy that hurts the people of our own country. Yeah. That block is growing in the East. And I think it was like, we got to stop that block. If that block grows to Romania, you know what I mean? We're screwed. And so they just said, we can take a shot at Trump. And at all costs, we got to stop that block from going to Romania.
It's not necessarily an anti-NATO bloc in that they're against NATO, at least not the way NATO is usually presented as, right? As a purely defensive organization, right? They're not against that, right? Who is against that? But they're against what NATO has become, particularly in the post-Cold War, post-Soviet Union, world. Right, it has become the primary vehicle for geopolitical consolidation of the European continent, and as a platform, a vehicle for power projection of the hegemon of the U.S. and Europe. In fact, the last head of the last Secretary General of NATO, Stoltenberg, when he was arguing with Trump in his first administration, why NATO is so important to the United States, why European members of NATO. He's like, through us, you can more conveniently project power, i.e. bomb and invade countries in the Middle East through Europe. Without us, we wouldn't be able to do that. Never mind that Turkey, which isn't a part of the EU, but is a part of NATO, is actually far more useful in that regard. Although Turkey doesn't always necessarily play ball with those games, at least not unless they get a nice sweetener in the deal, because that's the way Erdogan rolls. So, I think that there's certainly no hesitation to go after Gorgescu, even after the Trump administration opened up and singled that out, which certainly is a challenge. It is a slap in the face, whatever else it also is, right? I'll be interested to see what the Trump administration has to say publicly about that. And hey, if you're not going to get rid of the U.S. aid and the National Endowment for Democracy, if you're just going to leash them and reform them, well, maybe you could sick them on Romania.
Yeah. On the opposite. Let me ask you this: what the heck is going on? Something I don't understand, and you may understand, particularly with Russia's cultural ties to Serbia. There's some leader getting arrested, and odd things, strange things going on in Serbia, and address
Serbia.
it. Huh?
Not Serbia.
Okay.
The Srpska Republic of Bosnia Herzegovina.
Okay, now
ethnic area.
Keep in mind, a person like me who doesn't understand any of this, so make it real easy to understand what's going on.
Okay, there. So after the first war that broke up Yugoslavia, Bosnia Herzegovina, which is an absolute artificial bullshit construction country, it ties together an ethnic Albanian or a Muslim area. Ethnic Albanian is not correct, but a Muslim area together with a Croat area and a Serbian ethnic area into one country. Essentially kind of Yugoslavia writ small, but on under the West's control rather than say as an independent neutral country. And this is all shrunk down. And essentially the whole politics of Bosnia-Herzegovina since then has been kind of paralyzed because the Serbian part of Bosnia-Herzegovina, Republika Srpska, keeps rejecting all attempts to turn the Bosnia-Herzegovina into a little, loyal little Western statelet and in the Balkans there. And now they're going after the president of the Republika Srpska, Dodik, because, for a number of reasons. They've been building up against him for years. But of course, his support for Serbia, his constant arguments that Republika Srpska should separate from Bosnia-Herzegovina and rejoin Serbia in some fashion. It's another shot. It is about consolidating Europe, right? It's an ongoing geopolitical process, right, to bring Bosnia-Herzegovina into NATO and the EU and all of this. But there's also a project involved too. If Russia is winning in Ukraine, then we poke them in any way they can, including poking all of their allies, friends, co-religionists, whatever it is. And that includes, right, destabilizing Serbia. And a follow-on from that is destabilizing the Republika Srpska in Bosnia-Herzegovina. So to some extent, this is, I believe, at some level, it's certainly not the sole motivation, but at some level, part of this motivation is to stick it to Russia and anyone who is friendly to Russia or not on board with the Kiev regime in Ukraine. And that certainly defines the president of the Republic of Srpska as well. Although there's plenty of domestic things with regards to the Republika Srpska and Bosnia-Herzegovina and the the political paralysis, because one third of the country has always been able to effectively veto the consolidation of Bosnia-Herzegovina into Western political and military structures, and they're just choosing this particular time to go after him. It's nonsense. But I mean, who's going to protest? I mean, it's like what's happening in Gorgescu, like right now to Gorgescu. They're doing this because they're all the gloves are off, all the masks are off, and they're just cleaning house now in ways that they have felt some political restraints before, but now all the restraints, all the pretenses, all the masks are off, and they hope to, I don't know what, because they're just going to provoke a civil war in Bosnia-Herzegovina. I mean, do they think that the people of the Republika Srpska are just going to accept this and accept whatever official they would like to rule. I don't see that as particularly being the case any more than in Serbia, right? Certainly not yet. Maybe over time, enough generations, they'll have been EUified, the next generation, enough. But in both Serbia and Republika Srpska in Bosnia Herzegovina, that process has not reached the point where the people have completely lost their sense of national identity, ethnicity, culture, however you want to term it.
And I feel like same, to some extent with Romania, in that the people went to the streets. They know what's happening. And I think it'll particularly piss off the Trump administration because they tried to lock up Trump. I mean, that's basically what they did with Trump. You know what I mean? They grabbed him. They, arrested him. They took pictures of him. They they charged him with, mopery on the high seas, anything they could think of. They made up lots of charges against him. So I think that's going to be of a particular nerve. I think that's going to be a particular nerve to the Trump administration. Oh, by the way, guys and girls, you guys can become members. And Branko R has just become a YouTube member. It's like $3 or $4 a month or something. So anybody can be a member. That's great. Certainly appreciate it. Let me ask
Branko R, you are the man today.
Yes, sir. Hopefully Branko is the man. But yes, you are the man. Anyway, so let's Mark. Is it today or tomorrow? They're meeting again in Riyadh, I believe. Your thoughts on
Istanbul.
Huh? Istanbul. Right. Okay. Your thoughts on the ongoing?
Don't get too excited. All right. So the first round of meetings between the U.S. and Russia in Riyadh, right? They weren't really talking about Ukraine at all. At least that's not what they tell us, right? It was starting back at the beginning and starting of restoring diplomatic relations, right? Normalization of diplomacy, right? They set up a consultative body. They put out each other's initial starting positions on Ukraine, and then they agreed to appoint people who will later negotiate, the issue of Ukraine. But they haven't even gotten that far yet, right? And that was it. But at least they were talking to each other, right? Now, what they're doing in Istanbul is, again, this restoration of normal diplomatic relations that has been destroyed so much. And specifically, it's about embassy staff and the functioning of the embassies in each other's countries, as initiated by the Biden administration and then reciprocated, quid pro quo by Russia. The two embassies in each other's countries have been reduced to a skeleton staff. I mean, literally, they can't do anything. They're not processing visas. They're not doing anything. They're not able to do any type of consular work. They're not able to do any diplomatic work. In fact, the U.S. actually seized Russian diplomatic facilities, like property that Russia, some small things that Russia owned in the United States. And that's certainly probably something that they'll be talking about. Russia would very much, simply as a matter of diplomatic norms, and honor, they want those returned to them, right? And I don't know if that will be the primary subject, but I know that the restoration of embassy staff and normal work, right, is what the primary talk will be about in Istanbul. At least that's what's put out publicly. And I have no reason to believe that it's anything else at this point. I know that the Trump people were all for, let's let Putin and Trump meet yesterday and solve the Ukraine conflict. And the Russians are like, whoa there, you're putting the cart before the horse. This isn't the way this works. There's a process, right? And let's restore normal diplomatic relations first and actually have, diplomats and embassy that are able to conduct these negotiations, right? Because it's not going to be settled like some New York real estate deal, right? That's not the way it works. And so very much Russia is trying to put some order And in this process, I also think they're going to try and drag it out forever, because they don't believe that the U.S. will ever agree to what they want. So they just want to get the U.S. tied into the process and get as much normalization on other things out of it as they can. But it's really interesting. This week, there was a piece, even in RT, quoting Sergei Ryabkov, whom is the deputy foreign minister, probably after Lavrov, probably the highest ranking figure. There's not an exact hierarchy, the guy in the foreign ministry. And he's probably the one who will take the lead, right? Even if he's not doing negotiating, he'll still have the lead position, at least administratively, over any eventual U.S.-Russia negotiations on Ukraine. And he said, Russia doesn't understand Trump's peace plan. We don't. It was put by other officials more bluntly, in other terms, right? Referring to the first meeting as a train wreck, because the Americans have no idea what they're doing. They have no plan, right? Basically I would actually argue that's a good thing. I would actually argue that the Americans aren't coming with a fiat plan and presenting it to the Russians is, I think, an assessment that whatever plan they started with, right, call it the Kellogg plan or whatever, is completely, a non-starter, right? Things have gone way past that, right? And Russia's winning far too decisively and has too many cards in this particular situation. So, but on the other hand, it's also clear that right now there's no driving push towards a plan. In fact, the negotiations on Ukraine haven't even started yet. Right?
How about this, Mark? If I throw this at you, in a way, it kind of benefits both parties to let it go a little bit and to let Ukraine be weakened. Number one, because of the issue of leverage. And here's what I mean. Russia, whoever they're negotiating with, the more they win, the more land they take, the weaker Ukraine's military gets, the more leverage they have. Trump doesn't need leverage over the Russians because Trump wants to deal with the Russians and the Russians want to deal with Trump. He wants out of there. Trump's got bigger fish to fry. It's clear they're economic, right? Trump wants as much leverage as he can get over the Europeans. So both Russia and Trump, the more trouble that the Ukraine has, the more internal conflict that arises. They're at each other's throats in Kiev. We're hearing all kinds of stuff going on there. The more that happens, it actually gives Trump more leverage against the Europeans to say, look, we need a deal. Ukraine's in real trouble. I would make that argument that if I'm the Trump team, I'm not in all of that rush, much of a rush. Trump wants a deal quickly, but by the same token, weakening Ukraine, letting things happen there has its advantages, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. Russia's not interested in a deal quickly because they know that the Americans aren't ready for any deal that gives Russia everything they want. And then the Americans might understand that at some level too. Now, kind of an interesting, I want to call it an interesting interlude, right? That has come up and kind of put all of this negotiations on pause is this very curious Ukraine. It's being called a rare earth deal, but now it's about all of Ukraine's natural and other resources deal with the US. That after Zelensky first suggested it to Trump, right? Because he wanted to speak Trump's language. So why the US should keep supplying arms to the Kiev regime, could continue supporting Ukraine, is because we've got all of these natural resources, right? We've got all of these minerals, all of these rare earths, and it's a fortune, right? There's all this just laying in the ground. Ukraine should be the richest country in the world, and we've got more minerals than God or whatever. First of all of this is ridiculous and ridiculously overblown, and it's like a used car salesman trying to present his wares as being completely more than they are, right? Particularly all this stuff about rare earths. Okay, first of all, rare earths aren't all that rare, right? That's the first thing. Second of all, depending on where the deposits are on the surface, deep in the earth, how spread out they are, usually mining rare earths involves the most destructive strip mining, complete destruction that you can imagine, where you just basically dig up huge amounts of earth and everything on top of it and filter it, right, to get out tiny little nuggets, almost like mining gold, right?
Gold
yeah,
on a larger scale.
Yeah, on a profitable and practical level. And the reason why these rare earths in Ukraine haven't been developed already is because actually it's probably not very practical or profitable to mine them, right? Not now, maybe sometime in the future, whatever. And Russia has recently pointed out, hey, we got a lot more rare earths, right, than Ukraine does. But anyway, this has been a kind of selling point. And originally, Trump treated this like, yeah, let's do a deal. And then, but suddenly, within a few days, that shifted to, yeah, let's do a deal, not for future arms deliveries and support, but that's what you owe us, right? We're not giving you any more. That's what you owe us for what Biden gave you, right? We're going to get our money back. And Ukraine's like, are you serious? That was given to us, right? That was grants. It was given to us, right? There was no deal. We're not going to pay you back for that now. And Trump's like, oh, yes, you are. Because he's the mafia don, right? Not defending the Kiev regime in any way, shape, or form, but, he's basically, this is economic colonialism of the most ridiculously obvious kind. No, the first deal that they brought to Kiev, that was literally signing over Ukraine to the United States. It didn't only include natural resources. It also declared that 50% of everything that the Ukraine makes, even on ports and infrastructure, gets given to the United States. And I don't know if they were ever really serious, like they ever expected him to sign it. Maybe they were just doing it as a, so that he would have to refuse it, and then that would create further distance from them. If the Trump administration wants to be distanced from Zelensky, from the regime in Ukraine, that's a possibility at least to consider. But they must have been like, do you think he'll sign it? No, even he won't sign that, right? I have to think that's the conversation. Well, now they've got a deal 2.0. And supposedly this creates a joint fund, and then a certain amount of the profits on Ukraine's natural resources, supposedly including oil and gas, right? We don't are supposed to go into this fund, and then the U.S. can withdraw from it. It sounds like a complicated corruption scheme to me. It sounds similar to what Burisma did with Joe Biden and everything. We don't know the detail. We don't know all the details yet. We just know a few references. But there's a lot of intrigues going on with this. And Trump has been asked, what does Ukraine get out of this deal? And he pointed out that, well, we've given them a lot of stuff already, but he also said they get the right to fight on. And I find that, and Russia, by the way, the Russian government was like, what?
But I interpreted what he said a little bit differently. If I listened to it, I interpreted a little bit differently. What I interpreted from when he said this was, I interpreted it in a past tense. If you listen to the exact words, it can be interpreted as they've been able to do this. We gave them money. They were able to fight on. He didn't say they were able to. In listening to it, I have analyzed that. It can certainly be viewed as the right to fight on now.
Yeah,
but equally, based on the verbiage, it could be they had the right to fight on. Now, if I look at it in the context of everything else he's saying, it certainly appears that he's saying they had the right to fight on. All this time they couldn't, because he also goes on to say this thing would have been over in no time if it wasn't for us. So my interpretation of it is just to say they could fight on because we gave them money. If we hadn't given them money, they couldn't have continued to fight on. So at any rate, go ahead. I just wanted to throw you out that I have a little bit of different interpretation.
I don't have an interpretation of that yet, right? Because as far as I'm concerned, that's really vague, and I don't know what it means. But it definitely, alarm bells started going off there, right? And I don't know what he means by that, and I don't know that anyone knows, outside the administration knows what he means by that now. But certainly they suddenly started paying a lot more attention in the Kremlin. You can be absolutely sure. So we don't have any clarity on that. I don't know if there is any clarity yet, because Zelensky's coming to the U.S. and he's supposedly going to sign this, right? Now, whether he's actually going to sign it, I don't know. And this is really interesting, because there's also been reports that this is going to be signed by minister level people. And this is a big difference, right? Because one of the arguments that Russia has been making is that because Zelensky's official term of president has expired and he's extending presidential powers under martial law, that he's not the legitimate president, that Ukraine constitution doesn't allow this. And so that anything they sign with him in terms of negotiations would have no validity, no legal validity, in Ukraine for future Ukrainian leaders or anything. And lately, Trump administration, including Trump himself, has brought that up and referred to that Zelensky, he even said Zelensky is a dictator without elections, right? And we've heard from Waltz, we've heard from Kellogg, others that elections should be held in Ukraine. But if they get this if this deal goes through and Zelensky signs it, that means that the U.S. accepts that Zelensky is Ukraine's leader, right? And you're going to see an end to that. So that you want to ask what the Kiev regime is getting out of it. One of the things they are hoping to get out of it is legitimacy for Zelensky. No more question of elections or calling him a dictator or anything like that. I think that's what they think. Now we'll have to see what comes out of it.
Oh, they trust Trump. Yeah. Oh, they trust Trump way too. He will take everything they got, and the next day throw them right back. He'll pull them out of the bus for a couple of hours. Sure, sign right here. Oh, hey, slide that bus a little closer. Right back under the bus.
When Zelensky got this second deal, he supposedly was saying no again already, because what he wants is security guarantees from the U.S. And the Trump administration so far has held firm on no security guarantees from us. You talk to Europe. We're not interested in that game anymore, right? Now, he's never come out and said no more weapons for Ukraine, right? He said that the U.S. isn't sending any weapons now, and that's false. That is either a lie or he's interpreting it to mean one thing, no new weapons or whatever, because the U.S. is still delivering weapons to Ukraine. That's what the reports on the ground say. Things that were already being sent by Biden, being ordered through the military-industrial complex. All of that, continues. But there's an open question of these security guarantees, because Zelensky said, no, without any secure guarantees, no deal. But then the Europeans, in particular, evidently Boris Johnson, came to him and said, sign it. The security guarantees are something that we can discuss or fudge later. Just keep them on board for now. So there is a hope that if the U.S. sees enough economic interests in Ukraine, like if they believe that they've bought this, never mind the articles even in Forbes that point out that 70% of Ukraine's mineral resources are in territory already controlled by Russia, right? we'll put that to the side for now. But what the Europeans and the Ukrainians, the Kiev regime, are hoping to do here is to rope the U.S. back into, giving them an interest that they feel they have to protect, right, in Ukraine, which would be things that Trump believes are his now because of a deal, right? That's their game now. They're hoping to get de facto security guarantees by giving the U.S. an interest in their country. I'm not sure whether it's going to work that way or not. I'm not so sure how serious Trump is about all of this. I think that he would have had briefings by people telling him that all of this hubbub about massive Ukrainian mineral resources is vastly overinflated and it's going to require huge amounts of infrastructure and time to get anything out of it, much less, the conflict that's going on. And the Europeans, Macron came to Trump in Washington already and has already been kicked to the side without getting anything. And Starmer is there today, I believe, the British Prime Minister. And they wanted to come together. And I guess Trump demanded to meet them both separately. And they're pushing Trump on security guarantees, not for Ukraine, but for themselves. They are promising, they've come up with a plan now to put 30,000 troops on the ground in Ukraine, supposedly once a ceasefire comes into effect. Right? They want to put 30,000 troops on the ground, not on the front lines, but hiding somewhere back in Ukraine. And they're not even calling them peacekeepers anymore. They got a new woke term for them, reassurance forces, right? However, it turns out that those troops need security guarantees there from the United States because everyone knows that Russia would just target and roll them, right? If combat resumed. So they want air defense, they want air cover, they want logistics, they want intelligence from the United States. And that's what they're pressing. That's what they're pressing Trump on. It's all part of a combined effort now between Kiev and Europe to manipulate and rope Trump back into Ukraine and perhaps even into direct war with Russia. Russia, meanwhile, is saying, hello, we're here. We said no ceasefire. We have no interest in a ceasefire. We're not giving you any ceasefire, right? We've been down that road twice before. It's not happening again. Until there's a final settlement, we keep going on the ground. No ceasefire. What don't you understand? Why are you talking troops after a ceasefire? Because there will be no ceasefire, right? And they've also said, and no matter what, no NATO member troops in Ukraine, right? Whether they're wearing NATO hats or EU hats or EU member state hats, it doesn't make any difference. They're targets, right? No, none. So Russia has double nieted.
Do you remember a little kid's book called Green Eggs and Ham?
Yeah.
I call it the Europe's Green Eggs and Ham plan. Will you eat green eggs and ham? No. Will you eat them on a plane? I will not eat them on a plane. Will you eat them on a train? I will not eat them. Will you eat them on a bus? I will not eat them on a bus. Right? And that's okay, Trump, here's the deal. Peacekeepers in Ukraine. No peacekeepers in Ukraine. Will you have peace? Will you have them on a train?
I like that.
No. Will you have them in a plane? I will not have peacekeepers in Ukraine. I will not have them on a plane. I will not
go with the peace creepers.
Yeah, the peace creepers. Yeah, peace creepers. That's what it is. Peace creepers. It's the green eggs and ham. They just keep asking them. Not on a plane, not on a train, not on a bus. No peace creepers.
I will not accept your peace creepers.
Exactly. And they just can't get it. I'm going to show you a picture, Mark. This, to me, is what Europe is to Trump right now. It was a funny movie. It was a movie called My Super Ex-Girlfriend, right? Now, you're now looking at Trump in Europe, the U.S. and Europe, right? She's Europe. And it was the deal with the crazy ex-girlfriend.
Okay, I'm going to go right on the board and say Annalena Baerbock does not look like that.
No.
I'm just You got to say it.
But
Von der Leyen? No.
But every bit is crazy. It was the old crazy. It was what was the Jodi Arias, right? The dangerous. It's the ex-girlfriend that the guy has, and she's beautiful and seems great until he says, "I'm breaking up with you." And then she turns, then the horns and the fangs come out, right? That's Europe. Europe was like, the US was like, "This is my girlfriend." Europe. She's pretty. She's nice. Look at her. She has the news. Oh boy, she's got schnitzel over here, and she's got all these things. Amsterdam, Denmark, right? And then when they decide to break up with her, she turns out to be completely and totally insane. And that's what they got right now. They got a girlfriend that they're trying to break up with, and she is totally and completely insane. And now they're like, oh my God, she's absolutely nuts. And that's the way I see it. Not to keep coming out with all of these analogies from green eggs and ham and peace creepers, but I think peace creepers, we accidentally came up with something pretty good here with peace creepers. But yes, she's the crazy ex-girlfriend. When you try to break up with her, you find out she was a chainsaw massacre person all along.
Okay, so I've never seen Super Ex-Girlfriend, so I can't make a relation there. But all of this noise coming from Macron and Starmer about troops, both at times when their own military and own press have been reporting about what a pathetic state both of their respective militaries are in. The UK's, to be fair, even worse than France's, right? But I mean, they're not paper tigers, because even on paper they look awful. They look pathetic, right? But all this noise coming from them to me, right, speaks of a particular favorite of mine from Shakespeare, Macbeth. The quote: if you're thinking of Macron or Starmer making all of these promises, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing.
You know what? I think you've just outdone my peace creepers. Peace creepers is good, but it ain't.
No. At a certain, okay, so elevate the academic level of discussion thing, yes. But if we're talking memeable, right, peace creeper is going to be what everyone's saying in the comments tomorrow.
Exactly. Anybody who doesn't look up Macbeth's insults, no one can come up with the eater of foul meats and things like that. No one insults.
Fly on thee.
Yeah, no one insults like Macbeth. He is the Michael Jordan, I guess. I don't know. Shakespeare is the greatest. All right, Mark, once again, tell everybody where they can find all your good works.
Yeah, you can find me at Elon Musk's Twitter X still, at Mark Sleboda 1, and at The Real Politique with Mark Sleboda on Substack and Telegram.
Thanks a lot, everyone. Don't forget, share this on all your social media platforms. Follow me on Rockfin. Follow me on Rumble if you can afford to. There's lots of ways to, whether it's Patreon or buy me a coffee or whatever, if you can find that, if you can afford to contribute to the channel, that's certainly a great, I appreciate it. If not, who cares? Just share this. People need to hear these kinds of conversations. Share them on all your social media platforms, Telegram, Facebook, all that stuff. X, we're out.